standing together today as state and city leaders, as advocates, community members. Other folks can stand up here too. If any of the advocates want to come up here, feel free to. You won't get to speak, but you can stand here, certainly. Because we are dealing with a crisis in this country, a crisis that claims too many lives, that wrecks too many families, and that rips too many neighborhoods apart. We're talking, of course, about gun violence, and that combination of violence that we see from homicides to suicides, mass shootings to individual tragedies, that causes devastation without prejudice to zip code, to color, to age, or to gender. This crisis has gotten out of hand. On average, 51 children and teenagers are shot and killed in this country every single day. I know some of us know that statistic, but let that settle in. 51 young lives cut short each and every day in America. And that's why we're mobilizing on high school and college campuses, here at City Hall and our state capitol. And that's why we're taking action here today. And I especially want to thank our young people. I've stood in this room with survivors of gun violence in Los Angeles and Florida. We've pushed forward with voter registration of young people. And we formed the first in the nation's Youth Council on Gun Violence, a group of local leaders who just happened to be in high school, who advise this City Hall on policies to take to move forward on saving more lives in our community. Because every time we hear thoughts and prayers, that's not all you can do. You can also take action. And we're not willing to accept that in some communities, bullets are keeping children from reaching their 18th birthday or even their quinceañeras. That we have folks whose dreams are cut short, community whose potential is lost. And so I'm proud to stand with these incredible leaders today. We just wrapped up a discussion on a package of state bills that are designed to prevent gun violence and address this crisis head on. And sitting at the table were some of the great leaders of our state legislature who we hear from later. But I want to start with a student. So I'm going to ask Tyler Okeke, who is not just a student, but also the elected school board member, student school board member of the LAUSD School Board, and a member of my advisory council, to say some words on behalf of his generation and on behalf of this movement to end gun violence. Tyler, microphone's yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Mayor's Youth Council to End Gun Violence is a group of tenacious, passionate student advocates from all across the city of Los Angeles. And each and every one of us has taken it upon ourselves to make sure that we do what we must to end the senseless gun violence that happens in this city and around us in our communities. And we're so happy and thankful for our state legislature and our mayor for inviting us to this space to be able to advise people who make policy decisions on policy actions that are passionate and deeply personal to us. And we just want to say that we are here as an organization to support the incredible work of people who are already taking progressive stands on the place that guns have in our society. And we want to say that if any of your colleagues are pushing back on necessary legislation to make sure that our communities are safe, we are here to apply pressure, and we are here to make sure that the future, for our future and for our kids, is admirable, and it's something that we can be happy about. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you. Appreciate it. And Tyler, by the way, is a senior at Harbor Teacher Prep Academy in Wilmington in the city of LA. We appreciate you. And he's also served on my youth council. Next, I'd like to hear from Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, who is the chair of the Assembly's Public Safety Committee, where he really has marshaled the entire package of progress here in California to put pressure nationally on our Congress, our president, and our national leaders to enact some of the sort of gun safety laws we have here across California. And he has been a great leader, not just for the state, but for this nation. Reggie?
Thank you. And I also want to echo thanking the mayor for pulling this all together. The discussion we had was really, really important, but I really felt great, not only about what we're doing here in California, urging the federal government to use my colleagues as examples of how you do gun legislation and how you move forward. But I just heard this young person speaking, and it really made me feel good knowing that no matter what we do, I'm 62, that no matter what we do,
you don't have to say it, it's all right.
After me, they will solve it.
Right.
After me, they will make it happen. After me, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren won't have to worry because of these great young leaders. And that's what really makes me feel good about the future, because this really is about the future and how we handle gun violence, but most important, how we handle weapons and guns in our society. We need to move to that next level. As I said earlier today, we no longer have muskets. We no longer need an army. We no longer need to police our own neighborhoods anymore. We actually have that right now. And so we need to move forward with what we have to deal with now, because the weaponry right now is extremely, extremely dangerous, and we should not have weapons of mass destruction in our homes and on our streets. And that's the message that these young people get like that. We need to get the other people to understand that in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Next up, I'd like to ask Laura Friedman, my good friend who has been a council member. She is now an assembly member, and she's working on a multi-year campaign to have guns safely stored, safely locked up, safely away, because we know too many accidents and too much violence happens when people don't even know their guns are not in their own hands. Assemblyman.
Thank you. I want to thank Mayor Garcetti and his team for organizing this incredible roundtable and bringing all of the advocates and the young people together. I mean, young people really are shaking up this country and making them listen, I think, for the first time in a serious way in a long time. Just a week ago in Burbank, in my district at Burroughs High School, there was a completely student-led rally, and they had about 100 students come out. And many of the students spoke and talked about their fear of coming to school every day and their fear of walking down the street because of what they're seeing happen across the country with gun violence. And you know what? That's not on them. That's on us. We're the grown-ups, and we've allowed this situation to happen. We've allowed the proliferation of guns across our country and in many parts of this country almost completely unregulated, without background checks, without the controls that, if you read the Constitution, the Founding Fathers always anticipated. The beginning of the Second Amendment begins with two words that are often forgotten, and that's well-regulated. Well-regulated. That's our responsibility as a nation, to make sure that weapons, machines that are designed to kill and hurt, are well-regulated. And we have let that responsibility slip away from us too much across this country. We're told to have thoughts and prayers when there's a disaster, when there's an atrocity. Well, we've cried all the tears, and we've said all the prayers, and now it's time to take action. I introduced AB 276 to close a loophole in California that doesn't exist in some other states, which is that in California and many parts of the state, you don't have to safely store a firearm in your home when you're not home. That's outrageous, that you can leave a loaded weapon sitting on a table with a window open legally in the state of California. We don't have time to wait to change that law. Many other states require safe storage for all firearms when the owner's not home. The state of California needs to do this also, and they need to do it quickly, because we know that a majority of suicides that are committed, many suicides that are committed, happen because the person is able to get a hold of a firearm that's not their gun, but that's owned by a family member. We know that the majority of guns used in violent crimes in California are involving stolen firearms. I think we can all agree that weapons should only be in the hands of those that are licensed and able to own them legally. Well, we're failing to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and others who are not legally allowed to own them. And we can change that in California. We can close this loophole. We can change this law. But we have to have the strength and determination to do it, and to do it quickly. I want to again thank all of the advocates that are here, Brady, Giffords, Everytown, moms, and the young people that are giving up their time to make a safer environment for themselves and for their classmates. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I know that you're not going to fail.
Awesome. Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Laura. Next, I'd like to ask Jackie Irwin to come forward, whose community is still in mourning from 13 people, including a police officer who lost their life in the shooting in Thousand Oaks. And she has been a distinguished leader in this fight, joining together with this coalition. We're so pleased she could be here today. Jackie.
As we heard from the young people on the Mayor's Youth Council, I was struck by just how important their voice has been in shifting the culture and conversations surrounding gun violence. We recently passed the 20th anniversary of the Columbine High School shooting, and I was introduced to a phase that I hadn't heard before, the Columbine generation. This generation are the millions of children, including my own, who grew up witnessing senseless acts of gun violence take place on school campuses where they study, in movie theaters, at music festivals, where they just want to have friends, and even at places of worship. It absolutely horrifies me to think that our children have grown up asking themselves, can this happen here? In November of last year, my community had to sadly answer yes to that question. We lost Cody, Elena, Blake, Daniel, Jake, Justin, Christina, Mark, Noel, Telemachus, and Sergeant Ron Helis to a senseless act of violence at Borderline Bar and Grill. In the days and weeks after, our community came together to mourn, but also to be resolved to prevent this from happening to another community. As a mother and someone who's privileged enough to be in a position to do something about it, it became my mission to work with stakeholders still reeling from the tragedy to identify, concentrate on immediate reforms that enable us to better intervene in times of crisis. We have found that the tools used by law enforcement could be improved, streamlined, and publicized, and I have 3 bills addressing that. And we must also remind ourselves that for every life lost in a mass shooting, there are many more who have taken their own lives with a firearm after suffering alone and without the help they need. So we're working to make sure that those in crisis have immediate access to help. I want to thank all the advocates here. I want to thank the young people. You are really moving the ball on this. And I would like to thank Mayor Garcetti for inviting me today.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Jackie. Finally, Jesse Gabriel, Assembly Member representing the West San Fernando Valley, who's really shown tremendous leadership among his peers in putting together a gun violence working group made up of, is this number still right or is it higher, 16?
29.
29, see? There you go. It's more 50% higher. 29 members of the State Assembly and State Senate. He knows the power in numbers. He knows the importance of this issue, and he's networking with fellow legislators and leaders across the country on this. So thank you, Assemblymember Gabriel.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for having me. And it's a real privilege to be here and so grateful for your leadership on this, as so many others, where the City of Los Angeles is stepping up to convene this group of incredible young people who are leaders on this issue, of all of the advocates who are doing tremendous work in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. I thought I'd start with something that I think is unfortunately obvious, which is that when it comes to gun violence prevention, Washington, D.C. has failed us. Thoughts and prayers from Washington, D.C. won't keep our kids and won't keep our community safe. What we need are common sense gun violence prevention public policies that are going to make sure that young people don't have to worry about going to school, make sure that people feel safe walking in their communities, make sure that parents don't worry that when they send their children out in public that they're going to be victims of a mass shooting. As the mayor alluded to, we have formed a gun violence prevention working group in our state legislature in Sacramento. We recognize on this issue, as on so many others, when Washington, D.C. fails to act, when it can't act, that California has to step up and lead, and we are going to do that on the issue of gun violence. We have all of these legislators who have come together. We have assembled a package of bills that we are moving through the legislature that we're going to take to our governor, Gavin Newsom, and with our expanded majorities in the Assembly and the Senate, with our ambitious and bold and bright new governor, I think we can really move the needle on gun violence prevention. I will say just on a personal level, one of the things that I noticed when we first got our working group together is that so many of the folks were parents. We are people that have children. I have 2 kids under the age of 4, and so this is an issue that impacts us deeply as parents. We worry about our kids, and we worry about their safety, and I know that that's true for far too many people in our city and far too many people in our state. And so we are committed to making sure not only that our own kids are safe, but that kids throughout the state of California are going to be safe from gun violence, and that California is going to lead the way on gun violence prevention and keeping young people safe. Another point to mention, we have a number of bills that are working through the legislature. I have 2 of them, and am really pleased to have the support of so many of the advocates that are here today. I can tell you nothing makes you feel better about your bill than when a bunch of moms in red t-shirts that say "Moms Demand Action" come up to Sacramento for their lobby day and go around knocking on their doors, because all my colleagues understand that moms mean business and that they're there to get their work done. And so we're really, really proud to be working with Giffords and Brady and every town in Moms Demand Action, and they are really helping to change the conversation in Sacramento. But the group that is most powerful in speaking on this issue is young people. And we've seen that young people have changed the conversation in this country about gun violence. And so I'm so grateful to be here with the Mayor's Youth Council. I'm so grateful that there are a number of folks from the West San Fernando Valley that are part of that Youth Council. And I'm just really excited to work with the Mayor and with all the young people and the advocates to continue to make progress on this issue. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you again to everybody who is here. Thank you to our school police who have joined us for this and our advocates. With that, if there's any questions for any of the folks up here, we're happy to answer anything. No.
First to you, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Two-part question. It's always KSRW.
Yes.
First off, what do you anticipate, an LA-centric question first, what do you anticipate doing in the summer months that you haven't done in the past?
Yeah.
These portions of Los Angeles.
Sure.
And to make sure that it's not a bloody summer, essentially. And then number two,
Mm-hmm.
comment, even as you speak in this room, about 1,000 miles plus that way, National Rifle Association is meeting. Donald Trump was just there today.
Yep.
Said, a lot of funny things about the organization. And I just wonder what you think of, given that's the tenor of the conversation for a big swath of America, what can you do on the municipal and state level?
Right.
While a bunch of other people in this country don't believe in a single thing you said today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't believe it's fact.
Well, first, this summer we will continue to do what we've built up. Luckily, I think a lot of people, when we had Nipsey Hussle killed, one of the things I wanted to point out was there was 11 other people that were killed that week. And a lot of people thought that was a new spike. And while it's a spike and any spike is worrying, we have spikes all the time. And I think what we learned in years past was you don't respond to a spike just by getting more badges out there, though that can be important. You get out there with more intervention workers, with more prevention workers, with people who know the families, who know who the shot callers are, who can get between folks. You comfort the families instead of revenge being what comes next. Maybe it's healing and restoring some peace. So this summer we will have more than ever, more programming in our parks. We have more than ever our grid teams out there. And we're working to expand things like LA's Best so that we can have safe places for our young people. There's 1,200 more students that will be a part of that this year, even though it's run by our school district. The city is paying for that. And I hope that folks in June will vote and come out to vote on Measure EE, which will allow us to have the sort of counselors in our schools and social workers that do work across the summer and into the year. Because, you know, the superintendent recently shared with me that at one school they did some research and there was 135 kids that had suicide ideation. And there's a 750 student waiting list to see a counselor, and only one psychiatric social worker at that entire high school. That's unacceptable. We know that the combination of guns and either people seeking to harm themselves or others needs intervention. And so I know how I'm going to be voting on Measure EE, but it allows us to put those resources in the ground. So this summer we're going to continue to expand, as we always do, to have those resources of great police officers. And this summer, one last thing that will be different is 2 new neighborhoods will have community safety partnerships, which are police officers assigned for 5 years to a given area. So when it comes to guns, and I'm very proud LAPD has taken 14,000 guns off the street in the last couple of years. It's a lot of guns because we have, along the lines of some of the legislation proposed up here for our Attorney General, we are able to use that list of prohibited possessors, and we proactively, one of the agencies that has resources, we proactively go out there and pay proactive visits to people who have convictions or mental health issues that they should not have guns. So we're going to continue that and apply that this summer. In terms of, and anybody else can chime in terms of message to NRA and my wife's hometown in Indianapolis where they're meeting, there are a lot of people across America. I refuse to see a split where we paint entire states one single color. I have family members who are gun owners in places like Indiana because they're my in-laws, who I think care as deeply about their children being safe as I do. And I think that for all of us, we need to get back to a place where we had, you know, the NRA used to be a place that was about gun safety and learning how to use a gun safely. Now it's become a special interest group for gun manufacturers. And they might fool a lot of gun owners, they don't fool us. And at the end of the day, I would just make that case that it's not some extremist position that people disagree with. What is the stat? It's over 90% of Americans want background checks, 91% or something like that. That has to include a lot of people in so-called red states, a lot of Republicans and independents too. But anybody else who wants to chime in, feel free. All right. Go ahead. No, go, please, whoever wants. I'm just the convener.
And others at the state level, do you feel that you've gotten the kind of support from members of your own party for some legislation?
For the most part, I think that sometimes there are disagreements about kind of how a bill should be written, how it should take effect, but I think in terms of just the general goal of making sure that guns are in the hands of people that are licensed to have them and that we have background checks, I think that we have quite a lot of agreement. Having the borderline shooting happen just this last year in California, if people were asleep before about what was happening or thinking that California was somehow completely different, I think they woke up and realized that we do have loopholes and that we have laws that we need to strengthen. And we've gone in the right direction in California, and you've heard that we've had real results in terms of the number of gun violence deaths decreasing steadily. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. And we always need to look back and reevaluate laws. We have to look at how programs like our databases work, and I know Assemblymember Irwin is doing a lot of work on making sure that we have up-to-date databases and we have enforcement and we can take guns away from people that aren't supposed to have them, but that doesn't always work. And we saw in Northern California, I think it was 2 years ago, where there was a shooting where the sheriffs had tried to serve and take guns away from a man who wasn't supposed to have them over and over again, but the door was locked and he didn't answer the door. And they felt that they legally didn't have the right to enter even though he had weapons. Well, that resulted in a murder. So we do have work to do in California, and I think that we have now a legislature that's determined to get that work done.
Majority, right? So I guess
And a majority.
satisfied with everybody in your own party about what's been done?
I'm satisfied with, I think all of us have our own unique views about things sometimes, and you have to reconcile them with other people's views. But there's a lot of will and a lot of desire in California to make sure that we are the ones that pass laws to prevent this from happening. Nobody wants to have an atrocity in their own district and have their constituents ask them, have you done enough? Did you do enough to prevent this? Nobody wants to have that happen. When I was on the Glendale City Council, we banned the longest running gun show in LA's history. And I felt good knowing that if there was a murder in our community, I wouldn't have to answer my community and tell them that that gun may have been sold on city property. So we all need to be able to, with our straight face, go back to our communities and say that we've done everything that we can.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll just jump in for 1 second.
You're good.
Just to jump in on that, the question about, and I don't know what the word, a supermajority or whatever it is to describe the number of folks we have up in Sacramento right now, because we do have very significant Democratic majorities in both chambers and a governor who has a real track record on this issue, right? I mean, if you remember some of the propositions that our state has passed, this is an issue that is near and dear to him, and we've seen that in public policy, and we know that from our conversations with him. I'll say we've actually been able to get support from time to time from Republicans. My bill on gun violence restraining orders went through the Assembly Public Safety Committee unanimously. The vice chair of that committee, Assemblymember Lackey, is a veteran of the CHP, and he said, I think this is a really important issue. It's important that law enforcement have these tools to go in and take guns away from people who are at risk to themselves or at risk to others, and we were able to have Republicans on that committee vote in support of it. So occasionally there are going to be disagreements along party line. We're going to see people like the president who want to make these divisions stronger as for political gain, because that's their intention. But we also have a lot of folks who are gun owners, who are supporters of the Second Amendment, who understand that we need to have responsible gun policy in the state to help prevent mass shootings. And we're seeing that here in California.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thank you again to everybody. Appreciate it.